right, good afternoon. My mic is off. Good afternoon. I'll try this again. My name is Patrick DeRay, Chief of the Bureau of Automotive Repair, and I want to welcome everyone to our public workshop dedicated to some regulatory proposals affecting collision repair. For those of you who are joining us after our meeting earlier this morning, our bar advisory group met this morning, had a very lively discussion on a number of topics and some excellent presentations, one of which relates to this regulatory proposal from Jake Rodenroth from Aztec Technology. Encourage anyone listening in via the webcast or even attending just this session to go and check out that presentation once it gets loaded to the Bureau's website sometime next week. As many of you know, this is a proposal that we first vetted with the industry and our interested stakeholders, interested parties and other stakeholders to get some feedback on our interest in updating our collision repair regulations, many of which have been on the books since the late 90s, 1997, I believe. And we felt with all of the advancements in automotive technology that we certainly should be keeping pace with some of those changes. We're definitely behind and need to make some advancements or changes to our current regulatory proposals. So we vetted an initial draft of our regulations that we would like to proceed with. We did that in April of this year. Got a number of great comments from everyone who either attended the workshop or was listening in or heard about it and checked it out on our website, our draft, and gave some feedback to us that have now led to our next iteration of that draft regulation. We'd like to share that with everyone today, and we'll start off with a fairly brief presentation, after which we'll open it up for public comments. I believe the draft has been posted on our website for about a week. So if you haven't seen it yet and you're just getting it the first time, I think it's a fairly quick and easy read, just a few pages, but many have already had the opportunity to take a look at the regulations or this most recent draft of the regulations, and maybe you've come prepared to offer some feedback today. If that's not the case, if you're not ready or to respond, we certainly will welcome any input after the fact. This process doesn't by any means end today. We will. There's a much more formal process once we decide to file a regulation and publicly notice it. We'll have a hearing on it. We'll have a 45-day public comment period on it as required by law. So this is definitely not the last opportunity to provide feedback to the Bureau on this or any other regulatory proposal that we move forward with. So I am done with the brief introduction. We are being webcast, as we always do with our public meetings. Anyone listening in, this meeting was publicly noticed, and everyone who's got that notice and is listening in and would like to participate, you may do so by sending an email to us at barmeeting@dca.ca.gov. Again, that's barmeeting@dca.ca.gov. And I'll get a message from Zach Richardson, who monitors the webcast, and or Bryce Penny, who is also with the department's support team here, helping us webcast this meeting today. Any questions before we get started? And I turn it over to my team for the presentation. Okay. Let me introduce Michelle Walken, formerly Oberg, and Mark Guess with our technical training unit.
Good afternoon. I am Michelle Wolken from BAR's Technical Training Unit. I'm the supervisor of this unit. I also organize and facilitate an internal bar work group that is taking a look at these regulations that we're looking at today, as well as future regulations.
I am Mark Guest. I work for the Technical Training Unit of BAR, and I will be presenting the information on the proposed changes to the regulations that we spoke about last April. It'll be a very short, if you will, PowerPoint, and then after the PowerPoint, we'll go straight into reading the regulations, the proposed revised regulations, and take comments at that point. So in April of 2019, we presented three regulation proposals at a public workshop that was held here in this room. Today, we're prepared to present two revised regulation proposals. Lastly, we're actively working on additional proposals for future consideration. Some of those are, we're in the process of working and tweaking, if you will, 3365A of the California Code of Regulations, Title 16, which is for our trade standards for collision repairs. Also, still working on the giant one, that's what I call it, is for the automated driving systems or autonomous type of technology in the vehicles as well, along with other things too. But those are the two, we're kind of taking the regulations as they come up and in the appropriate order so they all kind of mesh and work well together. So as we know, all we had to do is listen to Jake from Aztec that the current technologies are changing very rapidly, and a lot of the technologies didn't exist at the time of the regulations that were proposed and adopted back in 1999, or 1997, excuse me. 1997 had our trade standards and our equipment for auto body repairs. That was when those were adopted. And in 2002, the airbag regulations was last updated and adopted. So there is a prevalent importance to updating these to kind of meet the needs of the technology that's being actually put in the cars and builds, and the technical advances in collision repair happen daily. So one of the other reasons for the need for the change in regulations is it's going to help provide some clarity for the auto body repair industry as a whole as to what needs to be done regarding the repairs in the state of California. So I mentioned that we were going to present two code regulations. 3303, the definitions that we had spoke on at the last April work group or workshop, we tabled those for future consideration at this point. And then we're going to go forward with the revised versions of the 3351.5, proposing them today with the equipment requirements, and 3367, which is for inflatable restraint systems or airbags. So this is a very quick overview of some of the stuff that we'll be going into detail in a minute. But for 3351.5, the equipment requirements, we added a new subsection to A, which requires auto body shops to have access to all equipment and current reference manuals for the types of vehicles repaired and shall be capable of meeting trade standards for the work being performed. And then we proposed an amendment to the existing A, which was, and we renumbered it to subsection B. It combines the corrosion protection equipment requirements. It's pretty much a cleanup of the reg. The reg was located in 1, 2, and 5 of the current regulations, and it was just to meld it into a more cohesive, easy to read for the actual person following that regulation. And then we amended existing subsection B, and we renumbered it to subsection C, which clarifies the access to repair, measuring, and testing equipment requirements and current reference materials to perform repair procedures. So on the California Code of Regulations 3367, inflatable restraint systems, we renamed that or proposed to rename that section to supplemental restraint system. which is more encompassing. Add new subsection A, which defines supplemental restraint system components. And we added subsection B, proposed, to it reinforces the repairs that installation of and repairs to these systems be performed according to manufacturer's service specifications. And lastly, in that, we renumbered existing subsection A to subsection C, which relates to a previously deployed airbag. And then just to conclude the 3367, we added a new subsection D, and the language is prohibiting the disabling of a supplemental restraint system component or installation of a replacement part that would cause the system not to function as designed unless an exemption is obtained by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration or other governmental entity. And it allows for the temporary disabling of the system for repairs for ARDs. And lastly, we renumbered existing subsection B to subsection E, and it relates to disciplinary action, and it's the same language that's in current regulation. So before we take open discussion, two things that we want to do is we're going to provide you some contact information. The contact information is for Michelle, as well as myself and Holly O'Connor. And any one of those folks, if you have comments or input, please reach out. And we got some really, really good input from a lot of different stakeholders in this proposal. So if you have more, please bring it forward, because it's a good thing, and we're listening and we're changing things based on that. I am now going to go through the actual newly revised regulation from April. The revisions have been changed again, and I think that if I can get through that, I think I had a pretty good day, because it's kind of a little complex, so hang with me a bit. So, can we put up the regulations, the text? That would be wonderful, thank you. So we're going to start with the proposed amendment to section 3351.5 of the California Code of Regulations. It's for equipment requirements for auto body repair shops. So A was a brand new section of language that was added. And the A states, an auto body repair shop shall have access to all, and we deleted the required, so all the equipment and current reference. We tried to remove manuals because it seems a little bit one-sided in that you have a lot of electronic technology, a whole bunch of ways of getting information now, and a manual is not the only way. It's kind of old thought process. To reference materials necessary for the types of vehicles being repaired. And the second sentence in that would be all auto body repair equipment, we struck out repairs, shall be, and it did say to vehicle manufacturer specifications. The current proposed language is, shall be capable of meeting trade standards for the work being performed. Okay. So we can either take comment on that, or if you want to just wait and hold everything to the end, that's up to you, the folks in the audience. I do know that I will mention this, and I'll take it off the plate. I was speaking to a very wise person this morning, and he pointed out to me that we have 3365A of the California Code of Regulations down below, and it really should be up in the front of the A language, and that will probably be a definite change that we will be making to the regulation. Because on its face, it was a little confusing, because that regulation indicated that maybe it didn't include paint repairs or minor body repairs. And we want everybody to understand that the 3365 is going to be the regulation that we're basing all this other stuff on, which is our trade standards regulations. So if we can just move on. So we have a new subsection B proposed that was A, and it's an auto body repair shop that performs automotive painting shall have, and we added language that says access to all equipment and current reference manuals we got rid of manuals, materials necessary to paint and repair non-structural damage, including but not limited to corrosion protection application equipment and equipment capable of, and at that point it just, it has a list. So what we actually did is we took existing language of the part, the old numeric number 1, 2, and 5, which was all addressing corrosion protection issues. And what we've done is we've incorporated the old part 1 and 2 into the new part B. Does that make sense? So it reads well. And then we made a list out of the rest of what was left of 2 and 5. So I'm going to read that list. The new number 1 would be applying exterior corrosion resistant primers, anti-corrosion compounds, and top coats. And number 2 would be treating enclosed areas on unibodies and frame assemblies, including pressurized spray equipment. And number 3 would be reaching full length inside enclosed areas. 4 is 360-degree spray application. We removed the word wand in case there's future technology in any way. We just want to be able to spray those inner panels that we need to spray that we can't get to, and how it gets there, it doesn't necessarily have to be a wand. We don't know what's going to happen in the future with equipment. And then number 5 would be fan-shaped pattern spray application. So that's all we really did, is we reorganized that so it kind of was all in one place and it kind of made more sense. And then we changed the existing B to C, and an auto body repair shop that is performing structural repairs shall have access to, is new language, proposed language, all repair measuring and testing equipment and current reference materials, we struck out again the manuals, necessary to diagnose, section, replace, or repair structural damage. We got rid of 2 vehicle manufacturer specifications. That's where we put pursuant to 3365 of this chapter, which I believe that the suggestion should be adopted. We'll have to talk it over in the group, but it's wiser to put that up at the top, and that'll probably get moved for sure immediately. And so it's including but not limited to, and then we have a list of equipment for structural type of repairs. Number 1, proposed language, the first part of it I'm going to read is existing language and law. A 3-dimensional measuring system that can locate points with the dimensions of length, width, and height relative to. We struck out 3 defined references and planes, and center line and body zero and planes again, and we put in just the 3, the center line, datum, plane, and 0 points to clean it up. The second part of that is number 2 is a 4-point anchoring system, existing language, located in the center vehicle, the vehicle center section, which is new language underlined, and capable of holding a vehicle in a stationary position during structural and or is new language. Body pulls, which is suitable for the types of vehicles being repaired. And then in number 3, we had equipment capable of making multiple, struck out body and the word and, multiple directional, structural, and or body pulls simultaneously to realign the body structure. Number 4 in that, originally it was about a MIG welder with the output of at least 110. We struck all the welding requirements for equipment in that area, and we've added instead, again, for pulling structures, equipment capable of generating enough pulling force to realign the vehicle structure. And we had manufacturer specifications, and we changed that to nationally distributed build tolerances. So that's new from April. So then number 5 was part of what I was mentioning before that we tried to clean up in the regulation. It goes back into corrosion protection. and it's actually back on the prior page on number, would be under letter, or what's letter B now. So all of 5 got struck for the corrosion. It got moved to B, if you will. And then we changed this a brand new sentence. All welding and panel bonding equipment and materials, we struck required and put necessary for the types of vehicles being repaired. So the next one that we addressed, and again, we got some really good feedback, and we listened. Some of the feedback you'll see is evident in the changes. So 3367 used to be the inflatable restraint systems and airbags. And now it's a supplemental restraint system is the proposed change in the name of the regulation. And then in A is all new language. It says, for purposes of this section, a supplemental restraint system. We got rid of contains and put may include but is not limited to the following components: airbag modules, airbag sensors, computer modules, inflatable restraint systems, seat belts, seat belt pretensioners, seat structural components, and steering columns. And the main reason that we added is not limited to is that as technology changes and the equipment changes, we didn't want to have to it's really challenging sometimes to alter these regulations, and it could take a few years. So we wanted to make sure that there's a little room in case there's new technology that's identified, as part of that supplemental restraint system. And so then in B, procedures for the repair and installation of this is all brand new language. Procedures for the repair and installation of a supplemental restraint system shall be in accordance with vehicle, we added the word vehicle, manufacturer specifications. And then C, which used to be part of A, an automotive repair dealer shall not install or reinstall or distribute or sell any airbag which is known or which by the exercise of reasonable care should be known to have been previously deployed and which is part of, and we changed the language to supplemental restraint system. So it aligned more correctly with what the proposed new title is. And then when we go to D, this is new language from April, and then we added some things to it as well after taking input. Except where an exemption is obtained from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration or governmental entity, because we don't always know if NHTSA is going to be the ones in charge of that. And automotive repair dealers shall not knowingly disable or render any supplemental restraint system component inoperable or install a replacement part that would cause the system to not function as designed by the vehicle manufacturer. This came directly from your folks' input. This does not preclude an automotive repair dealer from temporarily disabling a supplemental restraint system for the purpose of performing repairs to the vehicle. So the B in that became E, and that is the actual punishment, if you will, for violation of it. And it has not changed, but I'll read it for the record. Any violation of this section shall be cause for administrative disciplinary action. The authority of the Bureau to impose discipline pursuant to this section shall be in addition to and not a limitation on its authority to take disciplinary action or other legal action pursuant to any other provision of law. That's what I got.
I guess we are ready for public comments, and then being signaled that we did get something via the webcast. Did you send it to me? No. Texted? The other form of electronic communication. Okay. Go ahead, Gene. Yeah, while I look for this.
Mark, so hold on.
Gene, can you come to the table so we can all catch you on the webcast and just amplifies the voice a little better. Thank you. And I think the mic, one of them's turned on. That
Check.
one is, yep.
Check.
Yep.
Hi, good afternoon. Gene Lopez with Seidner's Collision Center, and Mark and Michelle, I beg your pardon. Thank you for the presentation. Just going back to 3303, and I know we kind of pulled that down, but just from an informational standpoint, the Collision Industry Conference is meeting in Las Vegas on November 5th. That's a Tuesday. And we have two committees there, one an emerging technologies committee, another parts and definitions committee. And I think it would be beneficial for staff to have someone present to get some of the ideas around parts definitions and some of the emerging technology that is creating new parts definitions. And it might help in looking at 3303 in the future.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I like that idea.
And Jack, Monty Etherton had some comments. You want to support those or?
Yeah, I was going to bring those up. I just,
Okay, I'll sit here and.
yeah, maybe you can, okay. Yeah, Jack Mladenov on behalf of the California Auto Body Association. I appreciate the input there, Mark, and some of the suggestions. I know we had a sidebar conversation earlier, but I just wanted to at least let some of the other people that I have not shared with, or at least the comment, but it was with 3365. And the way it reads, that's it's number C on 3351.5. When I read that, it looked like, because we're dealing with structural, and the way it read to me was that with structural repairs, you had to meet 3365, which is the standard, right? Which is OEM or something that's nationally recognized like ICAR. And so when I looked at B, which is the painting part, the section, I said, oh, there's no trade standard here. It's not tied to a trade standard. And like you can paint any, there's no trade standard there. We need to have a trade standard, especially in light of what we heard this morning with Jake on the discussion about painting and the thickness of paint. So it needs to meet a paint standard. So my suggestion or recommendation would be putting 3365 either in B or, tied in up to A, or somehow making sure that the repairs, having the equipment, you got to have the equipment, yes, plus you got to meet, the standard 3365. So that was the background, and I appreciate you indicating that was a good suggestion.
That's a great suggestion.
Okay. And the second item that Monty had raised, it's more nuanced, but it had to do with, I guess we can talk about, start with A. It reads that an auto body repair shop shall have access to all equipment and current reference materials necessary for the types of vehicles being repaired. And his suggestion was, at least, should it be the types of vehicles being repaired, or should it be the types of repairs being performed? And his comment was, if you're repairing aluminum, you're doing an aluminum repair. It doesn't matter if it's in a truck or a vehicle. So the vehicle doesn't matter. It's really the repair. So that was more of a technical issue he raised with the language. Gene, did you have a comment? I thought did you agree with that, or was that?
I did.
Okay, you may want to add on that.
So what we're looking at is an auto body repair shop shall have access to all equipment and current reference materials necessary for, and this is the part that, necessary for the types of vehicles being repaired. And so there may be a better concern there if we look at the repairs that are actually being performed and include that as compared to the types of vehicles being repaired, because it doesn't matter if it's a truck or a sedan. What does matter is if it's aluminum or steel.
I would agree. The way that was originally the thought process was the types would be, all I can do is give you an example, like the platform that are the 2016, 2017 Honda Civic. And we all know that the different ratings of the rear rails are
Right.
different depending on which which vehicle you purchase.
Right.
So it was more like just like, Honda, for example, has their own methodology for welding, right? We know
Yes.
this, right? And the reason that I kind of, and I'm not against what you're saying, I think it might be cleaner. I think it might be. I would like to sift it out a little bit,
Yeah.
But the types would be for, if you're working on a Honda vehicle, you better doggone well have enough Honda equipment to be able to weld it back properly, have the manuals, I'm old school, manuals, sorry, materials to be able to look up the procedures, things of that nature, so that it actually fits the type of vehicle you're repairing. So that was kind of the thought. But I like the other input because, it's something, like I said, I think I'd have to sift it around a bit and see it could well just wind up just like that, just like you guys are proposing. So I'm trying to see, the law is really odd, and I know you know this, I think. Wording is so crucial to making
Right.
sure that everything is, appropriate to what everybody's trying to accomplish, including your, stakeholders and yourselves and all that.
Yeah, we just wanted to bring it up to your attention so you can think about it. If you do make a change, it needs to be consistent all the way through because there's some other sections below that also use that phrase. So whether it's, and again, it's something you need to think, that technical people need to look at that. But anyway, it was just raised, instead of types of vehicles being repaired, it should be types of repairs being performed. Again, that's very nuanced. I don't know if it may, again, I'd have to, leave it up to the technical people. But I wanted to make sure it was raised. And I believe that was I don't remember.
It was under welding, so it's the same thing. All welding and panel bonding equipment and materials necessary for the types of vehicles being repaired, and perhaps it could be for the repairs that are being performed as compared to the types of vehicles being repaired.
Just in my first thought of that is I think it's much better in a way because it's broader than the types. That's just my first inclination in just listening to what you say. So I think it's broader, and I think that's better in that circumstance. So, but we'll go back and kind of look at it and go through the group and see exactly what
Yeah.
everybody's input is and see what's going on.
Other comments? We had Mr. Robinette and Mr. Kusa.
By way of definition there, one of the terms that could be used, and I think you just used it, was vehicle-specific repairs. Often what we're told today with the vehicles, even among a type of vehicle, like a sedan or a passenger car, we could call that a type of vehicle. Honda and Toyota have completely different repair procedures that are vehicle-specific, even among model years. And so perhaps to remain defined enough that we are dependent on wording that says the vehicle that you're working on has a specific repair, but you need to have capability to do that repair in whatever capacity that may be. And the term vehicle-specific is gained quite a bit more today than it once did, because there's so many different, within a line or a type of vehicle, different repair options as mandated by the manufacturers themselves. So that gets to be a little bit interesting to try to traverse, yet leave broad enough that we don't paint ourselves into a corner. So I would just offer that comment that maybe vehicle-specific could be worked into that somehow, perhaps, just an idea.
Thank you.
Maybe both types of vehicles being repaired and repairs being performed?
Yeah, I like that too.
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, it's good input because we'll
Yeah.
probably modify that for sure.
We may just have a new regulatory coordinator vacancy coming up, Dave. Just kidding. Find a third position. We have enough regulations to support it. Great, good feedback. Oh, yeah. Let's see, I did have a webcast comment. I'm just still trying to. Please change any shall or should to must or must not to be consistent with California legal definition. Okay.
Oftentimes, Chief, comment, or not comments, but positions from the vehicle manufacturers are a little soft, and that might be what this is being written to, that where recommended would be replaced with required, and so on. And so
Or-
that may be the reference
Yeah,
there.
we'll definitely run that by our legal counsel. There was a reference to, even the Supreme Court has ruled that when the word shall appears in statutes, it means may. I've never heard that before, but we'll take a look at it.
Gene, you make a good point about that parsing the word required versus recommended. I know that that's being worked out in CIC and other types of venues like that to see what that really means. There's a lot of that hangs on that definition.
If I could go on to number 2, 4-point anchoring system.
Okay.
And so a 4-point anchoring system located in the vehicle center section and capable of holding a vehicle in a stationary position during structural and or body pulls, which is suitable for the types of vehicles being repaired. So again, we're looking at the types of vehicles being repaired there as compared to the type of repair being performed. And today there are bench systems, if you would, as compared to frame machines. And when a bench system is used, and I'll manufacture specific, a Sublet bench or a car bench, where they're using multiple locations for anchoring the vehicle. And do we bring that in to the regulation? If you look at a Sublet bench, for example, and you're working on a particular portion of the vehicle, you're anchoring that vehicle where that damage is located, and it could be 8 or 10 points, or 6 or 8 points, and not just 4. Do we need to bring that in? Should that be part of the regulation, or is it the 4 points just understood as the minimum requirement?
I believe it's the latter of what you said. I believe it's understood. Let me explain. As a field rep for bar, we would go into folks' shop and they had the tie downs on the floor, tie down pots and stuff like that, and they would chain frame structures from tow hooks, which we know is a no-no. Things like that. We're loading energy in the wrong spots of the vehicle. And if you just had like a 4-point or just a way to anchor it, and it wasn't specific to at least 4 points in the center section, which is a very start-off kind of a point, it would cause folks to actually either invest in or obtain or sublet, which they can always sublet these repairs, the actual equipment that's necessary to pull a modern-day vehicle. Because I've seen so many vehicles in my tenure at bar that they have been pretty much destroyed from being pulled on the floor, not in the center section, just pulling it straight up off the floor. So the 4 points to your statement is like a minimal bench. And if you're going to do more, that's fantastic. If you have a system that's going to hold it in a whole bunch of to manage that energy that you're pulling, that's wonderful for both the consumer, the car, the repair, everything. But that's a minimal. It's a 4-point in the center.
And you brought up the word access, because it could be that the repairs could be performed in a sublet situation, and that might be going back to what the individual on the webcast could be referring to as well. As couldn't we be more specific about access to? If you have a repair, ARD, that is only performing non-structural work, and they perform structural work and damages the vehicle, they could say, well, we had access to it, but the guy didn't show up, or something like that. Do we need to be more specific about having access to equipment as compared to having that equipment on site?
I think it would be very challenging and very burdensome to the whole industry if you mandated that they had to have that specific equipment. Example, if you have a dedicated bench with jigs and things like that, are they required to have every single jig system that they may rent on site? It becomes to where what happens if a repair facility regularly, because I dealt with a few of these folks and they were good shops, they would sublet all of their structural repairs and they'd get an invoice. We have frame shop people that just do frames in our area up here, and they did a great job and everything was good. And it would be cutting them out of the market if they're a smaller enough kind of a business that they can't afford to purchase all that equipment for let's say 10 structural repairs they do a month, and it's not feasible for them to spend, what, 100 grand? Mm-hmm. It's just not feasible, and they got a really good frame shop that's down the street. It allows them to still function, and it doesn't wipe them out as a business. Because it's pretty rare nowadays that you have a vehicle that's in a collision that doesn't have structural repairs. It's fairly rare.
Correct.
And if you're doing collision repairs, which that's kind of what we're speaking to, all over auto body as well, that collision, I came from a family-owned body shop, and I know that we couldn't afford certain equipment, and we'd sublet it or whatever we needed to do because we wanted to maintain the business. You know what I'm saying? So if you went to the extreme or to the extent of making that regulation to where it's required, like it has to be on site, and we did inspections, most of those shops would possibly go away. And that's really not the intention of or spirit of the law or the regulation that we're trying to adjust and tweak, because it should give them an opportunity to successfully continue their business without having to purchase equipment that business can't afford.
So this is sort of off the cuff. How is the repairer who has that investment rewarded with their training and certification, but is outbid by a shop without the training and equipment, only to go sublet it out? And then that sublet, has now supplements for a higher cost of repair. So he brings it in for $5,000, and the shop A had a $10,000 repair, but by the time that consumer picks their vehicle up, it's now a $12,000 repair because it had additional sublet work that was marked up. And so the shop that's had the training and has the equipment is underbid only to lose the job, and shop B charged more at the end.
Right. Well, I understand what you're stating. I think it's a little presumptuous because the shop like that I'm using an example of.
Yeah, I get it.
They're super educated. They're super qualified on what they do. I'd have them work on my vehicle, and I'm fairly picky. So my point in saying what I'm saying to you is that those folks, I don't know if that makes them a smarter business person because they don't have all that upfront. It's kind of like aluminum repairs, okay? If I had an ARD and I wanted to sublet my aluminum repairs, I talked to one of the shops, and they're saying it's easy, maybe $500,000 worth of equipment if you do it right in the shop. I can't afford to do that. So they're responsible for those repairs. They're going to sublet those repairs, and it's probably for their market purposes. If they got a DRP or anything like that, it is good for their business to be able to maintain that sublet and not require them to have to try to put in $500,000 worth of equipment to do a handful of cars. Or by the folks that are doing that regularly, hopefully there's enough of a margin for you to get volume enough for that, and people come to your facility because you are doing the aluminum repairs directly, and you have familiarity with it and all that kind of thing. But yes, you really just quite candidly, you can't, I think you can, but I think it would be inappropriate to take away their ability to sublet a repair and force them to have equipment that they may use occasionally.
Okay, understood. In that same breath, I mentioned training, and the regulations don't refer to, they refer to the proper equipment, but they don't refer to proper training. And is that something that could be incorporated into the regulations? And in that, well, I'll let you respond to that.
If you were going to try to incorporate training into the regulations, whenever we had our very initial bag, or not bag, but like a workshop that we had, I had mentioned, about looking into maybe having folks like ICAR, if you're welding in the state of California, having a certification, things of that nature. But that would have to be a separate entity regulation about training, and how that mold would look and that model would look is unclear. And let me explain. If you are watching what the OEs are doing, and they're certifying their shops and all that stuff.
That's my next point.
Yeah. Sorry, I stole your thunder. But if you watch what they're doing and the certifications and stuff, I don't know, I'm not saying it's not something to think about, and I think about it all the time, but I don't know that it's going to, I think it's going to pan out to where the Bureau doesn't provide training for that or certify the technician, because you already have the OE certifying them in their cars, and they're very specific to the make and model and the equipment they have to use, and the training they get is far surpasses what we could ever give them, or try to say, hey, take a test and now you get a license for body shop. And as that migrates along, because you have to kind of watch it play out where the Bureau fits into that mold, and whether or not we need to step into saying, hey, here's the minimal things that you need to do as a technician as far as training goes to work in collision repair. And here's, over and above what would be expected, that kind of thing. So training is amazing and wonderful. It's just, as you saw again from Jake speaking, keeping up with it is very challenging for everybody in the industry.
Yeah, very, very much so, and we're challenged by it every day. Looking at all the vehicles that we have coming into our shop, and so yeah, I was going to bring that the OE certification and the presence of having vehicle manufacturers. And it could be part of conquering aftermarket parts, and I'm sure that's and maintaining loyal customers by having the OE repair certification. And so in the regulations, there is comments about non-structural repair versus structural repair, but we don't license a non-structural repair facility or a structural repair facility. And likewise, we don't or license a certified facility as compared to a non-certified facility. And as the vehicle manufacturers are making a greater presence, isn't that a future license application that could be considered? That we are only performing non-structural repairs, and therefore we're licensed for that, as compared to we perform structural repairs and we're certified and we license for that?
Yeah, we kind of talked about that a little bit when we met. The challenges of that is that the two repairs kind of go hand in hand now. You can take a very small amount of damage and you have some type of structural repair. It's very rare that we have people just knocking out dings, if you will, and painting cars. They're actually doing the replacement of components and different things like that. So to dissect it that way, I don't see that it's actually, and it could play out totally different, but I don't see that that's feasible. And the reason why is the percentage of people that are actually not doing structural repairs, they're doing two things. They're three things. Either they're subletting it, they're leaving the damage, right?
Or they're doing it wrong.
Or they're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and And that's why I've brought up a couple of times a tiered application, if you will, so that if that repairer is licensed as a non-structural repairer and continues to perform structural repairs and gets complaints about them, now there's a little more weight to the Bureau and what to do with that repairer who is performing repairs that they're not licensed to perform.
Well, I'm certainly not saying that that's something that we wouldn't look into as it goes along.
Of course,
and we're
yeah.
certainly thinking
Of
that where that's headed. It's just a matter of there's so many variables right now in the collision industry, and you could be. I'm going to talk to that gentleman in a second about it. You could be a certified welder today from ICAR, and at some point, they may have a new technology next week that they're not teaching you in ICAR, right? So there has to be a little bit, at some point, there'll be a leveling of that industry to where the technology is a little bit more the norm. It's just not there yet. So to try to forecast of how those things would look is very challenging, and it would take a lot of regulation, and it could be totally wrong or off base. So sometimes it's better to sit and wait and watch kind of some of the things happening to see where it's going, so that it's more predictable of what kind of regulation or what kind of even licensing or anything like that would be, something that would need to be addressed. I could see at some point, like, you heard Jake from Aztec say, and I've said it a lot at bar, is, I could see them, at some point licensing the technicians for advanced driver's assistance systems, for example, and any kind of autonomous vehicles, automated driving systems, which is, your full level of autonomy. So that's something that I have a passion about, and I'm trying to write a whole bunch of stuff. So anybody that's in the audience, either watching or anything, if you have input on that, please email me, because I take that information and I gather it, and it's a good thing. I get a lot of input on that.
One quick comment just about that. What's interesting, just by way of illustration, with the interesting difficulty of trying to parse that out, is a piece of glass, like a windshield, a structural part? Well, on the surface of it, most people don't consider glass to be a structural part, but it is. And so when we start to delve into what regulations might look like and how to code that and what parts are or are not structural, it gets into a very interesting level of gray, because we have parts that are structurally considered structural load-bearing energy management components of the vehicle, and then there's other parts of the vehicle that are bracing effect type, not necessarily structural in and of themselves, but when welded into place or installed at the manufacturer, then they have this bracing effect that adds to the rigidity of the vehicle, the crashability, its ability to redirect forces, that sort of thing. And so hence the windshield, because it's important, and even the adhesive we use. So I think, while this is an excellent conversation, I'm loving this, this is pretty fun, how to define that and draw a clear, distinctive line will have to take some time to figure that out. So I'm in favor of talking about it, also in favor in seeing what kind of transpires and how the dust settles as new technologies are brought to bear.
It's very often brought up in the Auto Body Association or auto body repairs to reference cosmetology and barbering and how specific they are in what size wash tub you're going to use and what's the temperature of the water to clean some. I'm making that up, but you get my point. They're very specific, and heaven forbid we should need to be that specific in the collision repair regulations, but there's a reference point, right? So Dave, you're speaking about windshields and whether or not it's a structural component. in those in the room, we know that it is. Unfortunately, there could be a repairer out there that doesn't and continues to use the wrong adhesive, right? And so that's my point to going back to, license to what you perform, to what you perform. And so enough of that.
Yes. It is a good conversation. And trust me, that thought goes around a lot about how, what that would look like or how you could do that. Just a fast point. Many years ago now at BAR, I was asked to try to help with trying to set up some kind of a license, if you will, for a technician. And one of the things that kept coming back, and that's why I kind of mentioned ICAR for welding, because they're kind of a standard, if you get a certificate from them, it's
There
a
is no
good
other.
certificate. Yeah, it's
Right.
good, right? And there's colleges that can give you a welding certificate, so I don't want to leave them out. There's a lot of wonderful colleges doing stuff too. But coming back to one of the things that always has come up is, and now it's kind of changing with the technology, so this is, maybe 15 years ago I'm talking about, is if you have technician A, and they're a really good technician, I was a structural technician, and I had a lot of pride in my work. If you have technician A, and he or she would like to straighten the frame rail, and they can straighten the frame rail and make it look really dimensionally correct. It's in specification, it's reset in a safe condition, and it's allowable by the manufacturer. Technician B looks at it and says, I feel more comfortable changing the frame rail because I just know that I can weld it in properly and I can do a really good job, and I've reset the frame back the way it was from the manufacturer as long as I'm following those procedures. Who's right and who's wrong? And how do you measure that? I would tell you if there's an allowable repair and the technician can do it, have at it. He's doing it correctly, he or she's doing it correctly, but if you got a thing that says there's no repairs, like on the 1500 megapascal steel in the 2017 Honda Civic, then if they're repairing it, there's a problem.
There's a problem.
So there's so many different ways to measure that, and I think there can be a baseline at some point, and you start off with something that's known, like a certified college that can certify somebody in welding for auto, or ICAR, or whoever that entity is. Maybe that's something, that was why whenever I presented what I presented, I was thinking on the lines of there's a good starting point. If you're going to weld in California, you should have some kind of certificate, and that's something to look at.
Thank
that
you,
kind
it
of
is,
thing.
yeah.
So it definitely is a thought. It's just really, it's a big thought process with a lot of stakeholders that you have to be thinking about as well.
So in that reference to cosmetology and all the different language they have in their regulations, we have this corrosion protection language that is pretty specific about how to apply cavity wax, if you will, because that's what we're referring to, correct?
Correct.
And so the regulations that would define how to MIG braze or mag weld and so on, wouldn't they be like providing corrosion protection, or shouldn't they be like that? Why? I guess my question is, why was the regulation created for corrosion protection and be so specific as to not only the equipment you're using, but how you're using it, and why doesn't that happen with the rest of the regulations?
That's a great question. Let me see if I can address it, okay? I wasn't here in 97 whenever that was drawn up. Corrosion protection is something that as you are aware, during a collision repair, always comes up, whether you fractured the E-coating or either you removed the material to replace the panel, whatever it was. So it's a standard thing, and you used mag welding and you used MIG brazing and all different kind of welding. Right now, I don't believe the welding has settled down that much, for one. So if you put it in regulation, just like it was in 97, it says a metal inert gas MIG welder with an output of at least 110 amps for unibody repairs, an output of 200 amps for conventional frame repairs, or capable of meeting the trade standards for work being performed. Okay, that's what it used to say. That's not applicable today. So as fast as everything's changing, that's what I'm trying to mention from the last thing I said. It's changing so much, you almost have to get a norm and let it settle down a bit. To whereas like everybody's universally doing mag welding or MIG brazing or whatever, to where there's like a more of a norm, and then you could actually look at that. Right now, it's not settled. I think at the last meeting, I mentioned something. I think people kind of thought and I was just reading an article, so I have no way of verifying it, but it was from Repair Driven News on they have the technology right now, trillionths of a second welding to actually weld the steel onto the glass or a windshield.
Right.
And they're talking about the potential of them doing that, and then when you replace a windshield, you buy the whole component and put it in, including the steel. That to me is pretty futuristic, but I don't know that it's out of the reach. So it's really challenging to try to take an industry that has so many different you can take any vehicle, take a Toyota, Honda, whatever, and each one's going to have its own repair methodology for that specific vehicle. It could be by make, it could be, by the model, or it could even be by, like my Honda example, whether it's a four-door that has a lift or it has the actual two-door. The steels are even different. So it's got to be challenging for the industry, because if you sit down and you think about a technician, a really good technician, and they're replacing that 590 rated steel in the 2016 Honda Civic in the rear because it has a lift on it, lift gate, and then the next thing you know, something comes back in. It's like, oh, it's the four-door sedan. I just did that last week. And they're presuming it has the same steel in it, unless they're checking. So until all that stuff settles down, it's going to be really challenging to get specifics without having to go back in. And I'm all for this conversation. I like this conversation a lot. But for us to be able to go back in, okay, and then change it is going to be, it's almost worth waiting the time to get it right, or as right as it can be. You know, I'm kind of spearheading the advanced driver's assistance systems regs and the thing in our work group, and I will tell you that it doesn't scare me. I like the challenge of that. What bothers me is I know by the time it hopefully at some point gets submitted, in between the time it gets approved and submitted, there'll be changes.
Yeah, artificial intelligence will be calibrating their own vehicles.
Exactly. See what so what I'm saying is that some of this stuff has to settle down a bit first before you can even consider it, because it's kind of, a lot of it's an unknown. So I think that's great input, though. I like that a lot. Any other questions, or?
Yeah, it's sitting. This table moved close. It's like I'm sitting in front of the principal or something. We're too close here. Thanks for letting me share my.
Thanks, Gene. Other comments, questions? Anything on the webcast? No? Yes, come forward. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Good
My name's Scott Zeik. I'm with Safe Flight Group, and I apologize for my attire. I've been on a planes, trains, and automobiles week, including weathering a nor'easter out in Buffalo or New York. So I just wanted to comment on the glass. I am open to having a discussion. Safe Flight is our industry on your definition of structural component, but we take a hard line on glass being a safety device. And my comments were submitted a month or two ago.
got them, sure.
And if you haven't read them, I encourage you to do so. And I wasn't here this morning because of my delays. I will switch over to ADAS. And I think I made some points in my comments that we should look at that. It's not going to slow down, it's only going to escalate. We are scheduled to do over 400,000 recalibrations this year.
Oh, wow.
With the gentleman from Aztec, they're a partner of ours. And with Bosch, if he mentioned that, I'm not sure. But we are welcome to do that. Our biggest concern is the safety of consumers after a repair is done. And it also includes how it's done. But, you know, and that includes pre and advance notification, so that you should not be able to do work on glass or perform a glass job until you've told somebody that their car has ADAS, and you inform them whether you can or cannot do the work. Because if you can't do the work, you're sending somebody out on the road with a system that's not calibrated, or it's turned off. And driving behavior, it's proven by NHTSA and IHS that driving behavior changes when somebody has ADAS on. It's proven that they're going to drive closer to the car in front of them. And when they turn it off, if their behavior doesn't change, it increases crashes. It's counterintuitive. So I'm more than happy to have the conversation about structure versus crash part versus safety device, and it makes sense. And maybe we'll come to that conference that the gentleman mentioned, and we'll make our points there. But in closing, there's not one regulatory body, not one state, not the federal government that consider glass a crash part. So I'll leave it at that. And thank you. I'll answer any questions you might have. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very
Pleasure to
much.
be
Very
here.
much.
Sorry I missed this morning.
Nope.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any others? Okay.
I do. It's a little bit question. So, Mark and Michelle, we're at where we're at now, and we've made some suggestions. Can you give any hint as to what we're going to look at next? I mean, if we, you know, if there are another series of regulations, what would they be? And so industry can take a look at them in advance. And I'm not asking for anything.
The regulations that would be proposed would have to come from Chief DeRay as far as whenever his timing is to release any kind of proposed regulations. That's his business and call. I will tell you that we're working actively, and we have a very good draft just about ready to present on 3365A, which is the trade standards for auto body repairs in the state. That one just kind of fell together, and it complements the 3351.5, the equipment. They kind of work really well together, so it's I was a little concerned about pushing this out because of the fact of the way that one reads. It's just it's very clear of what everybody needs to be trying to accomplish in the regulation. So that's the first one. I anticipate that. I just whenever people want to have the time to roll it out and stuff, and it's available and things like that. But the next one that I've been working on a lot, and I've been getting input from our group, but is the advanced driver's assistance systems, as well as all the way up to the automated driving systems. And I'm kind of working that on the side because this other stuff is keeping pretty busy on different things. I will say this: we've gotten some really good and amazing feedback from industry, all the stakeholders, a lot of different folks chiming in, and I would suggest that you keep chiming in because it's going to create a lot better of a product. Just like some of the corrections or input that we received today was really good. So that's kind of where we're at right now. In the future, we'll probably be looking a lot more different, as it goes along.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I'll just jump in here real quickly and say that I'd like to move the package forward. Obviously, there's some tweaks and some changes based on some of the comments we got here today. I just feel like we do another workshop, let's say it's January or April before we get to another workshop on this package. I feel like we're constantly working to perfect a package, and as many of you know, perfecting regulatory or legal language is near impossible. So I feel like our next step is probably to clean them up based on some of the comments we got, and I'd love to send them out to everyone. But I'd also simultaneously, or in conjunction with that, send them to our legal office and get the process going.
Good,
I
yeah.
think we're so close to
Real close.
getting agreement on this. But let's say we're not. Let's say there are some additional, and this package goes forward. There's other packages coming down the pipeline where cleanup could be done. I just feel like the longer technology's changing as we speak, so I'd rather get the package going and moving ahead because we still have a long road ahead of us. And as I said earlier, I believe I did, that we have a formal comment process beyond the workshops that
Right.
we've done that gives everybody another crack at
Right.
giving some input into the regulations. So I think we'll go back tomorrow or the start of next week and kind of clean these up, and we'll send them out to our stakeholders and say, take a look at them again, but we're moving forward, and there's still more time to provide additional comment to us as we go through the process. But I'm kind of wanting to end the workshopping of this at today's meeting, and then just move forward. If
Okay, thank
everybody's
you.
in agreement, just so we can get something going.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll have other packages that will follow behind if we didn't get everything right that we didn't, or think of something that we didn't manage to come up with during these two workshops, then we can always add it to that another package down the road. So that's kind of the plan from the way I see it. Michelle, would you do me the favor of introducing the other members of the work group?
Absolutely. So we have the majority of our bar internal collision repair practices work group up here. To my far left is Adam Marquez. Next to Adam is Michael Colazzi. Program Manager 2, Jaime Ramos. We all know Mark. Who's not in attendance today is Holly O'Connor, who is our regulatory specialist. She decided to be in Ireland and not here. Don't know why she would choose that. And we also have a member out in the audience, Wayne Ramos, Program Manager 2 in the Forensic Documentation Lab. I think that covers everybody?
Yep. Okay. Thank you for doing that. I didn't want to, we have a lot of bodies up here at the dais, and I didn't want to leave anyone out. Any other comments, questions, concerns before we adjourn? So, as I said, we'll clean these up. We'll put them on our website. We'll announce it to our advisory group and our interested parties that are on our... Are you on our interested parties list? You must have to get the notice to come today. Good. So we'll continue to welcome feedback on them, but at the same time, we're going to proceed with moving beyond the workshop to start the review process with our department and hopefully get these publicized or, notified through the Office of Administrative Law, OAL, and that's the agency, kind of the gatekeeper of the regulatory process, and begin the formal process for vetting these regulations and hopefully getting something adopted, I'd hope by midpoint next year. All right. Thank you so much for your attendance, your participation, and continued dialogue with us to improve our regulatory responsibilities and our role, continuing to help make for a vibrant auto repair industry, as well as protect consumers, as is our mission out there. So thank you so much, and thank you all to the webcast listeners, and the one comment we did get from the individual. We'll check on the language that we use in our regulation. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of the day, week, and year.